Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality and is about discovering your place in this great universe from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to take a gentle, I say as a meander, through the thoughts, the possibilities, perhaps the threads of the universe, and where we say we are going to delight in a story of fiction. We are going to take ourselves in the time where we say, how can we dance and just go out and say, I would love to hear a story. I would love to go on an adventure. I want to be able to travel. I want to go back in time, perhaps be able to say, oh, what if? Can we exist in a world of what if? What is that all about? Today, my guest, John Amos, his book is The Bones of the Apostle. And I love this book because it is an absolute read that, especially if you're an elder and you've kind of come across some of the words that are in the books, we'll elaborate on that in a moment, but also, too, for others who are looking for a mystery, a story to really take you on an adventure. Once you start and you set yourself into the story, you just go, wow, I have no idea where I'm going, where the next page is going to take me, or perhaps even where this story may or may not end. And it really is a delight. John, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Dr. Jeanette, it's my pleasure as well.
So glad to have you. You know, right when I picked up the book, I wrote it down. I wrote, it's creating a great story of adventure through literature, history, and travel. You know, I absolutely loved the book because you had no idea where it was going to go. Do you think that that was truly about just sitting down and saying, where will my thoughts take me?
Well, not quite. You had no idea where I was going to go, and sometimes I didn't either. One of the things, I'll just tell you, as a writer, I have almost no control over my characters. I don't know what they're going to do. I've sort of a general idea. But when it comes down to specifics, they do their own thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. You know, what I loved right in the beginning of the book, there were some words, and I'm going, oof, it depends upon your age group sometimes, if you've been exposed to them. The words, and I wrote them down, were like Sufi poetry, perhaps Cyrano, maybe Shelley, Handel, Mozart, Cleopatra. You know, I look at my kids who are in their 40s, and they're like, they've been to some, private schools, and they read all of those books, so they understand what they're saying. But if we look another generation down, many of them haven't read any of those books. They don't know those works. They don't even know those people in history and time. Don't you think?
Unfortunately, I agree with you. But knowing that, even though I still put them in, because I'm going to do what I'm going to do. If they're interested in Cyrano, they can look it up online. It's pretty easy. Cleopatra, everybody should know about. Handel, maybe not. Mozart, you turn on the FM station, you're going to find Mozart. In a way, this generation, I think, has basically lost their path.
Yeah.
In the sense that they're cut off from this stuff. And it adds so much more to your life. Like, I could make a joke about Handel in his big wig and his trumpet voluntaries and so on. And they won't understand, but I did. I had fun writing it.
Right. But you know what I think really I loved about it is it's almost a primer to take you and leap you into a phase. Like when I hear Cleopatra, I'm like, oof, I already know a picture comes up to my thoughts or to my mind. It's almost, just as you said, you can go look it up, And when you look it up, it's sort of like a primer to be able to take you out into more literature, to read more, to find out more about history. I think that's truly important when a book can take you and guide you to other places. In other words, keep your mind still going and your curiosity awakened, perhaps?
Correct. But let me ask you a question. When you think of Cleopatra, what sort of image pops into your mind?
When I think of Cleopatra, I think of sultry, jewels. I think of feminine. I think of, sometimes I think of the word snake. You know, we think of like magic or things like that. Those are the words that come to my mind.
In other words, you think of Liz Taylor.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Yeah, I never watched her movies, so I don't know.
But that's how I wrote the book, the Cleopatra Caper. I saw a 2-minute excerpt from Cleopatra the movie, where she's rolled in on a giant sphinx and Caesar is standing there awaiting her. And I'm not a fan of Liz Taylor particularly, but she walked up with her young son, smiled at Caesar, and then winked at the camera. And I said, that's really a nice touch. But real Cleopatra was a rather small woman who had basically blonde hair and looked kind of like a Greek, a classical Greek woman.
Wow.
You don't, modern movies, well, I guess it's a way of reinventing history. I get all my ideas from old movies and old sitcoms. But,
you know what I think was the most important sentence I saw in your book, John? It says, is this tiger somewhere in a distant forest, or is it within me? And I think that truly is about your book, right? Because I think your book really takes you on an adventure, and it really exposes what comes through you, yes?
True. The tiger theme, which is the opening of the book and in the closing as well, and the main character, Flinders, can't figure out whether the tiger is outside in the forest or within himself. And the answer is it's probably both. And there's a tiger in all of us, and I don't mean a tiger menacing or stuff like that. I mean a tiger in the sense that there's a part of us that we have to wrestle with and deal with. So that is, you hit it on the nose. That's the underlying theme of the book.
Absolutely. You know what I loved about the book, too? I was on another page, and I folded it down. I've got a bunch of them folded down to talk about today. But you shared about it, said, I hear that the city is considering paving over the cobbles. And why don't you go over to City Hall or County Hall and protest? And I think that's so funny because I live in New Orleans, and just recently, I think it was maybe before the Super Bowl, they were downtown in the French Quarter, and they were laying pavement down. And they said, oh, look, we dug up some of the pavement. There's cobblestones here. Isn't that nice? And I'm thinking, yeah, you need to dig off all of that crap and put the cobblestones back so that they have a purpose, because water could go through them and it wouldn't flood here. Now you're putting all this pavement on top of it, you know. But it's so interesting because I've been here for decades upon decades. So I think sometimes when you make a statement like that in the book, you're going back into past history. You may have been here before. Let's step into, when was it, cobblestones? Can you feel or sense or hear it? I know myself when I walk in New Orleans, I can go back in history and know when I was there in my past lives and decades before. I feel it, sense it, and can smell it. So don't you think that's truly a great work of fiction that can take you back like that, like your book?
I know. It was a great work of fiction. The cobblestone things, yes. They, for me, and there's couple remarks about them all throughout the whole series, in a sense, are the past. And in a way represent our past lives, and paving over them is in a way an act of destruction. But in this case, I think it was Pettigrew that said that. You just go off to City Hall, chain yourself to a banister, and protest.
Right.
Perhaps they get more modern activists.
Yeah, but if you look back at it, I mean, like, there were a lot of witches. There was a lot of that dissonance going on in the French Quarter. Hey, they probably did that in those days and times, right?
Well, the witch thing, yeah. That's when the Phineas was asked, do you see witches every day? He said, of course. And do you agree? Well, of course I do. To be otherwise would be impolite. But that's, when I wrote that, it was kind of, a Harry Potter moment. But there is, who was it? The great, it was a German political scientist, Max Weber, said that one of the problems with modern civilization, like we have, is that the mystery of life is disappearing. Yes. And I think in all my books, it's sort of an unspoken theme. The mystery is gone. The mystery of the Ottoman Empire. I read a lot about, vanishing empires. And those vanishing eras, to me, they're a mystery. I love to look at, for example, old pictures, of basically the point that you get photographs of a different world that, in a way, is magical. Now, I know that the good old days are also the bad old days, but, there is a sense of loss that I have when I look at those. And I actually write from old pictures. That's where most of the descriptions come. I look at it and I say, if I were actually in that picture, what would I see, hear, smell, and touch? And that's where you get most of the descriptions from.
Yeah. It's so vivid. I can see, in my mind's eye, I distinctly remember, I'm almost 70 now, and when I was in fourth grade, I started singing and playing the pipe organ. I was singing the Latin Mass with the Catholic priest and playing the pipe organ. If you can remember back in those decades, when you went to church, you were quiet the entire time because it was just about the priest and the organist because they spoke Latin. In the church, the Catholic Church, it was very much of a reverence. You know what I mean? It was very much of a mystery. And I'll never forget, I used to do that 10, 12 times a week, all the way up until I was in high school. And one day, I went in, and they had the altar turned around. They were speaking English, and they had a guitar. And I said, holy crap. There's no more religion. There's no more mystery and mystique. And now people are going to go awry because now they're going to think that they can rationalize it. In other words, the mystery of it was all gone. And I found that in your book, too, it says, you wrote, yes, our crosses are hidden, our bells are silent, and our worshipers live in fear, but you continue to worship. And then it says, yes, we survived and continued to worship. And I think that we look at how religions, how the church, how our relics, how things have changed over the decades, yes?
True enough. And the loss is tremendous. You're right. A guitar doesn't exactly match a massive pipe organ.
Correct.
I visited Cologne once, a couple of years ago, and went into the Cologne Cathedral, which is very impressive, just there, Gothic stuff. And there were some people, and all of a sudden the organ cut loose, and the building just shook. And I imagine myself, what kind of an experience can you have hearing that massive organ in that building with a priest in front? It's uplifting, just by itself. A guitar sitting there strumming, fine, wouldn't produce the same thing.
Yeah. I can honestly remember. I at fourth grade, I'm thinking, no, I couldn't have never done that at that age. That's not true. That's not possible. But I did, and I'm going, wow, what? That's a mind blower in itself. Do you know what I mean?
Wait a minute, here, fourth grade, could your feet even reach the pedals?
No, barely.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think, we say, oh, but you look at the kids in fourth grade now, and they're doing so many different things, and we say, wow, how can that conceptually be? And I think it's in life and in the decades in which we live, it's what's presented in front of us, so to speak. I think also, too, you have another sentence in here. It said, my Irish mother once said, you got the gift, so do you. And you know what? We think about that all of the time. How much magic and mystery, how much connection to the earth and the ground, how much the knowing of something else within our thoughts and our consciousness have we squelched, so to speak. And kind of like now we're on this road where this is your life, follow these parameters, make sure you get likes, stick between the line kind of living. Don't you think?
Keep the cell phone going and make sure your apps are lined up.
Yeah.
I just had, you get me an idea. As you were talking, I'm sitting here scribbling, and with your permission, I'm going to introduce a new character. Mm-hmm. A young woman that plays the organ. Remember, I'm an author. I get to do anything I want. So
that's right. That's right.
I'll work you in there in the next book.
Oh, very awesome.
If you can find yourself.
Yes. Oh, I will. And you also talk about the church rules, because I think this book, again, the title is The Bones of the Apostle. We think about the church rules. I mean, again, in New Orleans, let me tell you, when Hurricane Katrina, half of the churches were wiped out. I mean, that was just it. And they didn't come back, and the people shifted. And we look at, did their hope shift? Perhaps their concept of what was real or who could save them shifted. And now they got very mechanistic in their ideas. Do you think perhaps sometimes humans have said they've gotten beaten down so many times, finally they're just very mechanistic now?
You could argue that, and yeah. But, I take a little different view on that one. I don't think human beings ever can get beat down. They're pounded down for a while, but there's always hope. They'll come back. Human beings always surprise me in many ways.
But is it the church that has to... But, John, is it the church that has to come back? Or is it the feeling of the ashes and the relics that we're walking along underneath our feet? So, in other words, the energy of the story comes back.
As far as the church goes, it's been around for quite a few thousand years. I think it can handle itself without very much problem. As far as the underlying, I go back to the word mystery. That's never going away. I think, in one of I was talking about seeing these, not kids, because, gosh, they're 30 years old, to the gym with their ears plugged into earbuds and looking at their cell phones. I kind of suspect if they had an alternative to that lifestyle, they might just take it a lot quicker than you would think. One of the problems with this generation, they've abandoned, obviously, the church, but they've also abandoned hope in many ways. Can you blame somebody who's 35 who's living with his or her parents? There's no future there. Why? Yeah. Why would you look out to see nothing but grayness? So they turn inward. They take selfies. By the way, that's how the series started. I got tired of looking at people looking at themselves with selfies, so I said I'll write a story about two young Englishmen, an Englishman and an Irishman, that were sort of the selfie takers of the 1900s, and see what happens. And in the series, which is actually an arc of life, they grew up. Well, they had to. People were trying to kill them. But other than that, no, they grew up. In Cleopatra, which is not before us today, but the opening sort of sequence was one of them was sitting there looking across the street to where Holmes and Watson had their flat. And he says, look, they're getting into the carriage. And the other one said, okay. Basically, he said, well, Watson's really too fat, and Holmes is concealing his bald spot under this deerstalker, and they're a bunch of bumblers. And not like us, who are young and strong and we know what we're doing. Of course, they didn't. And at the end of the book, they realized that Holmes and Watson, these, we would call them boomers these days, actually knew what they were doing and were struggling in their own way against very, very difficult circumstances. And this sort of the final chapter of the book is they toast Holmes and Watson and say, you, in effect, have set the standard for us. And I think kids today should do, well, they should do that, but whether they will or not, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, too, I think, John, that brings us right to the point in your book you wrote, all men dream, but not equally. Those who dream at night awake to find nothing but emptiness, but those who dream by day may act on those dreams to make them possible. Am I such a dreamer? And I think, let's talk about the concept of life. Life is really an illusion, but most people say it's a reality. Why is it a reality? Because you try to keep validating it every day and staying within the same old rut that you've been stuck in. If you treat life as an illusion, you can really take the dance of existence, perhaps.
Perhaps. But let me correct you one little spot. I didn't write that. T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, wrote that. Mm-hmm. And there's a man who gets life to the fullest, in a way. And I admire him very much for that. He took his dreams and he made them what he could. I think all of us should do that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know what, and your book, the bones of the apostle, they're out looking to find the bones of the apostle that are missing. And you wrote on one page, it says, this is vintage garbage. I haven't smelled anything like this since the City of the Dead. And I thought that was so funny because last year I was really sick, and I mean downright sick. I had been in a wheelchair for a period of time. I got so sick. And I had lost my sense of taste and smell and everything. And someone said to me one day, well, what is it? I said, man, I can't eat this stuff. It tastes horrible. They said, what does it taste like? And I said, it tastes like Biochem Lab and Cadaver Lab. That's what it tastes like. You can use that in your book, too. But boy, like everything I tasted was like that. I just couldn't shake it, And I thought... And I took it back, and John, just as I'm saying this now, you could just use this in your next story, too. I all of a sudden leaped into the story, and I'm in this... Hold on. I leaped into the story, and I'm in this wheelchair, and all of a sudden my head spun around, like the story out of The Exorcist. Her head spun around, and I said, oof, this is not my existence. I choose not to stay in this wheelchair anymore. And literally, I have not been in one since that day. And isn't that awesome? How we can take just something, a thought that meanders through our consciousness, take it to the story, give it a few present-day connections, and say, ooh, it has now altered my everyday existence. And isn't this cool? That's what your book is about, but that's how my life is too, yes?
It's true. And from my perspective, that's one thing great literature should do for you. Mm-hmm. As a practical matter, I write my books, and they're short, and they're designed to let the reader step out of this world and into another one, and have a break from the sort of dull reality, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
And more than that, they're designed to be read on airlines. So, whether you're cooped up in this terrible place and sort of at the mercy of somebody else, you can at least get away. And then when you land, great. It was easy. But, I write to let people just, get away from things and maybe think of some other things and perhaps generate a little hope in their lives. So, and for me, of course, as a practical matter, when I write, my wife says, you come home, John, you come home every night, and right after dinner you disappear into the 19th century, and I don't see you until the morning. And it's true.
Yes.
As I write, my imagination goes there as well, and I am refreshed. I love it. And so you get all these little jokes that I put in. That's just fun. But the underlying thing is, yes, there's more of me because I write, much more. I'm a different guy than, say, 4 years ago when I started. I think, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, fatter maybe, bolder maybe, but a different guy internally.
I absolutely love the book, too. And I also came to the page that says The Veiled One. And I'm not even going to read any more words about it, but the veiled one to me went, oof, I'm going to veil my existence and I'm going to step out into this other space and time. Because you know what I loved about the book, John, is that sometimes you read fiction books and, boy, they take you along a story. You say, yeah, that's what I did. And, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to try what that person did. And it's still in the human blah, blah, blah dogma, Oh, I got on my bike, I went to the car, I got a divorce, I did this, those kind of things. In other words, that kind of, as we use those, that collection of words, so to speak, that dictionary. And I think your book, truly, almost every single sentence has a different word that's a different reference to something else or somewhere else, or takes you or creates you to be or dance or explore something else. And I think what's so vitally important is that you are not the human that's in this form sitting here in the chair in this conversation today. You're so much more. It's almost as if you've put a veil over whoever you are, and you're saying, I'm going to let something escape out of me and see where I end up. And I thought that was wonderful, and that's how I see your book.
I see. I love the description. But a lot of the literature today is just sort of a variation of what we already do and know. Why would you read a book about having difficulty getting on the soccer team
right.
When you had your own difficulties getting on the soccer team?
Yes.
What does it do for you? It doesn't do anything.
That's correct.
It's a repetition of the real world. Maybe more elegantly put, but it's the same. No, mine are designed specifically not to be that way. There are worlds beyond worlds beyond worlds. And I think Flinders expresses it continually. He says, I'm always searching for the horizons beyond the horizons. That's the human spirit right there.
Yeah. I don't want to find myself on the page of the book or my missteps or regrets or guilts or shoulda, woulda, couldas. I want to find the magic and the mystery that someone else is going to say, ooh, what if? That's what I want to find in a fiction book. And I think really, truly, you wrote on this page, you said, they leave their existence in the sand, a rich, full life, like the legions of centuries before. When I think about your book, again, The Bones of the Apostle, when I think about it, and just as I shared before, I said we are truly walking on our ancestors. We are walking upon all of the religions, the relics, and perhaps all of the souls of those who have passed before us just underneath our feet, yes?
Yes. And we'll add one more thing. The souls that have gone before us may be still within us.
Yes. Yep.
If you think about a relic, it has a mystery of its own. But also, if you look upon it, you say, is that something I've done before? Or is, well, for example, let me put it a different way. In one of the other stories, the hero pours coffee, bought a coffee pot in the local market. It belonged to a nurse in Edwardian England. In fact, I've got the coffee pot with the engraving on it. And he thinks, what did that nurse think when she poured coffee many, many years ago? is her essence still in this coffee pot? And then he looks up and he says, am I pouring this coffee or is the nurse pouring the coffee? And
that's right.
In a sense, that's what a relic is.
Yeah.
I suppose we're surrounded by relics, technically.
Yeah. You know, when I think of it, I always get, like I said, I can walk down the streets and feel a sense of knowing where I was then. I always say that our soul is so eternal. This lifetime is just a chapter in our book. And if we think about that, almost everywhere we go, we keep little cell fragments from where we have been in the past. And we use those to create our future and to be able to create the person who we are. So really, we're such a very exponential kind of being. We don't even realize it. And I think sometimes when you delve into a fiction book or you go into out of body and, when you go to sleep at night or you go into your dream state, that's when you can kind of collect some of those little fragments, perhaps?
Perhaps, yes. A dream state, interesting. Then there's the question, are those my dreams? Are those somebody else's dreams that's coming to me? Or are those dreams my dreams when I was in a different place?
Yes. Mine are all out of body. Honey, when I lay down at night, I'm gone. My husband even says to me, he says, you snore like crazy. I said, that's because when my spirit leaves my body to go out of body at night, I need to know where the homing device is to come back in. And I'll tell you, this morning, I could not get myself back in for nothing. I could not wake up. I had such a headache. I said, wasn't ready to be back in this body yet. And I think, and you share some stories in here. It's like when you're jumping back into your space, is that really where you want to be? And how about the question, which one is real, or are these parallel universes?
Now I got two thoughts on that one. I've written another book, part of which was set in an old film, and the protagonists are looking at these men sort of half sleeping, and he says to the other one, says, they're dreaming their lives away, and maybe they don't want to wake up because their dreams are better than their lives. I've had that feeling sometimes. I don't want to wake up. I like where I'm being. But the parallel universe is another thing. That's, what's her name, Rowling, with the parallel universe. It's a very sophisticated concept and well articulated, but which nobody seems to be, at least I haven't seen very many comments on that. But a very advanced way of thinking. I'm sure at a subliminal level, it occurred to people that that's what's going on. But I've never seen a reviewer or anybody ever comment on it. It's basically science fiction disguised as not children's, as fantasy.
Yeah. Well, as my son says to me, Mom, I'm not going to edit your stuff. I said, why not? I said, somebody else told me I had to edit some of my stuff, or clean it up or whatever. He says, it's a stream of consciousness. Leave it as it is. Just put your writing out, leave it as it is. And that's what I do all of the time. And I think really your book is what I call it, I wrote down, it's a primer to take you where your soul fragments have been before and to allow you to dance in the ethers. That's where I see your book, John.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just absolutely loved it. It was an absolutely fabulous read, and I hope that perhaps maybe we will have you on with another one of your books, because just as you say at the end of the book, yes, we have hope. There is always tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I rewrote that chapter, or that ending, and I said to myself, John, this is a terrible downer. Flinders and Griselda are separating forever. That's terrible. I can't do that. So I put in the bit about the couple trying to get into the car in the rain, and he sees that, and he says, you know what? I'll write her a letter. And that's the beginning of a whole new chapter. I like happy endings. I don't like bad stuff. I think all endings, that's just me, I guess. But on the snoring thing, next time my wife complains, I'll say, no, It's a beacon. I was out about it, and I homed in this morning. I love it.
Very awesome. I think, John, another chapter will be another existence, another story, another time in which you jump into. And I really loved your books, John. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Sure. The easiest way, actually, to get all the information is just to check out my website. It's got all the books out there, all the links to everything. I've written a bunch of blogs about the books because, I had to rethink what I was doing and actually impress with myself once in a while. But JohnAmosAuthor.com is the link. That gets you everything. The social media links, the whole thing.
Very good, John. It was such a pleasure to have you with us here today to share about your book. Absolutely loved it. It's a great fiction read, and I'll tell you, boy, once you start reading it, if it doesn't instill something in you, you need to take your time. You need to have a vacation. You need to start to dance in your ethers, so to speak, because I really absolutely loved it. So I thank you so much for joining us today.
And Dr. Jeanette, thank you very much for having me on. This has actually been fun. I originally thought, oh gosh, I'm going to have a terrible time keeping up with her, but no, it's fun.
Yes, it was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. If you'd like to find out more information about John Amos, again, the book Bones of the Apostle, please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. And it is about being able to say, oh, man, I'm looking for something really just to take me out of my life. My life is just, I feel so bogged down. I feel so stressed. I feel like it's just whatever. You don't want a fiction book you're going to find yourself on every page. You want a fiction book that will transport you. This is an absolute wonderful book. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher. Until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.